we can get started. As some of you may know, but certainly I doubt if everyone knows that Mike Traugott has studied mass media impact on American policies. He has a particular interest in the use of surveys and polls and how they're used to cover campaigns and elections. He's retired from the University of Michigan, where he is now Professor Emeritus of Communication Studies and Professor Emeritus of Political Science in the College of LS&A, as well as Research Professor Emeritus of Political Science in the Institute of Social Research. I had an opportunity to hear Mike present earlier this summer, and I said, oh, I know a lot of people who would benefit from hearing what Mike has to say.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I have been following presidential elections for quite a while. I have a particular interest in polls and the use of polls in journalism. And I'm going to talk about the race tonight in the context of what the current polls say. But I'm going to begin by just highlighting some points about the Trump presidency as background. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the way political scientists look at campaigns and elections. And then I'm going to turn to the current data. So Donald Trump, as you know, ran as an outsider. He had no prior experience in governing or anything to do with policy making. He ran explicitly as an outsider, and he vowed to drain the swamp. He has little interest in policy. In fact, in some contemporary media accounts, you will find a description of what some observers call a post-policy government that we're now in. It's pretty clear that Donald Trump doesn't believe in science, that he governs from gut feelings. He stretches the truth, and sometimes he tells lies. And as an incumbent president, he's followed a very unusual strategy compared to his predecessors. Most people, when they are elected president, think about how they can, especially in their first term, they think about how they can enlarge their coalition to make it easier to win the next time. He has been atypically focused on his base without regard to enlarging his coalition. That could be because he was a minority vote president who won the Electoral College the second time in the last 5 elections. That's a commentary about how well the Electoral College is functioning nowadays. While he was an outsider when he ran for the first time, when he runs for re-election as an incumbent, of course, he has a record to defend. He had a particular campaign strategy, which I think was probably targeted towards, again, being a minority president in terms of the popular vote, perhaps losing by more than he did to Hillary Clinton, but winning an Electoral College majority. And his main themes of his campaign were the strength of the economy and a plan that he had to, again, turn out his base at a higher level than people who would support Joe Biden. The standard model for estimating election outcomes that political scientists use rests upon 4 key principles. What is the division of partisanship in the constituency? In this case, the constituency is the entire United States. How are the candidates being evaluated? What are their main policy differences? And will there be differential turnout that might favor one over the other? So this is a chart from Pew Research about the distribution of partisanship in the United States in the last 25 years. And the United States is a democratic country in terms of partisanship. You can see this time series from 94 to the end of 19. When we ask the party ID question, we do it in two parts. First, we ask people whether they think of themselves as a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. And the Republicans are clearly the minority party. Sometimes there are more Democrats than independents. Sometimes there are a few more independents than Democrats. But then we ask the independents whether they lean towards the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. And you can see in the lower graphic, in the typical blue for Democrats, red for Republicans, that in the country as a whole, there's about a 5 percentage point advantage for Democrats. Why don't the Democrats win all the elections? Well, first of all, the Republicans have higher turnout than the Democrats, and the Republicans are less likely to defect to the other party than the Democrats are. So typically, our elections are decided by 3 to 5 percentage points. One thing to keep in mind also about partisanship in the United States is that in contemporary cross-sectional terms, the Republican Party is a party of whites. And the Democratic Party obviously has white members, but it's also disproportionately the party of minorities, Blacks, Hispanics, and Asian Americans. And I'll say a little bit more about this in a few moments, but in addition to the current state of partisanship by race or ethnicity, of course, the demographics of contemporary America going forward are that whites are expected to become a minority in the United States by 2043 or the 2044 election. So for a variety of reasons that include mortality, differential birth rates, and so on, the proportion of whites in the population is on the decline. The proportion of minorities in the US population are increasing. So we're focused, of course, on the 2020 election, but it's important to pay attention to these trends as they portend the future of the parties. One important evaluative criteria in the electorate is how people think things are going. And you can see that since the Trump inauguration, most people think, the yellow line, that things are headed in the wrong direction. It's almost, it's about 3 times as many who think the country is headed in the wrong direction as opposed to the right direction. You can see these dotted lines indicating some key events across the Trump presidency. They've had some small effects on this distribution up until recently. And after around the time of the 2018 election, the 2 lines began to diverge with more people thinking things were moving in the wrong direction. And then on the far right of the graph, there's a line without any text but a little black dot. And that is the beginning of the coronavirus. And then you can see that there's a big shift of about 12 points or so to moving in the wrong direction, up to where we are at the time of this survey, which is conducted by a company called Civis. 71% in the wrong direction, 22% in the right direction. How could this happen? How could this divergence take place? Donald Trump has never been very well liked among Democrats. And they have pretty consistently been disapproving of his performance as president. independents were relatively uh, 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 decisive in this as well, not evaluating his presidency positively, but he held on to the support of Republicans by and large. So this change, this shift, and moving in the wrong direction post the coronavirus pandemic has to be attributable to the evaluations of Republicans. And here's a picture from Pew that shows a slightly different question wording, whether you're satisfied or dissatisfied with the way things are going in the country today. And you can see that since the start of the pandemic, the proportion of Republicans and those who lean Republican who say that they're satisfied with the way things are going in the country has declined from 55% to 19%. There's been a decline among Democrats, but in the equivalent time period, only about 10% said that things were going, they were satisfied with the way things were going. That's declined to 3 percentage points, but that's nothing compared to the 36 percentage point decline among Republicans. So the federal reaction or response to the pandemic embodied in the White House has been pretty wholeheartedly negative, and it's especially the turn among Republicans that is hurt, that is reflected in the increasing dissatisfaction, which is hurting Donald Trump. It's not only concern about how things are going nowadays. It's also a growing concern about future generations. And these are data from Pew that measure responses to a question about whether life for future generations of Americans will be better, about the same, or worse than life today. And in the top line, you'll see that about half of Americans expect that future generations, think about this in terms of their children. About half of Americans, 48%, say that things will be worse. About twice as many as those who say that it will be better. And you can see that this relationship is related to age. Older Americans are more concerned about things getting worse as opposed to getting better. Whites are a little more concerned about things getting worse compared to getting better. And Democrats are a little more concerned about things getting worse than getting better. This is tied up with aspirations about generational change and transfer, and the part of the American dream that said that things will be better for our kids than they are for us. And it runs counter to the Trump measure of the performance of the economy in terms of how well the stock market is doing, compared to the growing economic inequality in the United States. Then there are these assessments that we measure that we call traits. And here's some recent data from Pew, and it reflects the percent of voters who say that Trump or Biden can be described very or somewhat well by this particular trait. So these are ordered in the relative advantage for Biden or Trump from top to bottom, right? So for the trait of energetic, Trump has an advantage of 16 percentage points. That's the difference between 56 and 40. For courageous, they're about even. Trump has a 1-point advantage. For honest, Biden has a 12 percentage point advantage. cares about the needs of ordinary people, 13 percentage point advantage, a good role model, 15 percentage point advantage, and even-tempered, Biden has a 35 percentage point advantage. So in terms of these evaluations of the personalities of the candidates, of their personal traits, Biden has an advantage. We can also look at survey data that assess the advantages of the candidates individually and then in comparison on particular policies. So again, these data are ordered in the same way. So for the trait makes good decisions about economic policy, Trump has a slight advantage of 3 percentage points. And effectively handle law enforcement and criminal justice issues. This was before these data were collected before most of the recent demonstrations. Biden has a 3 percentage point advantage. Makes good decisions about foreign policy. Biden has a 6 percentage point advantage. 11 points on handled the public impact of the coronavirus outbreak. 13 percentage points effectively handles race relations and bring the country closer together, a 14 percentage point advantage. So in these personal trait terms and on some policy related measures that pollsters or survey researchers think are important, Biden is clearly advantaged. I want to also, though, begin to talk about the impact of race, and in this case on policy evaluations. This is a set of data from the Monmouth University poll, and this is the question of is racial and ethnic discrimination a big problem or not a problem in the United States? And you can see in these data from late June that 2/3 of the sample said it was a big problem. It was up a little bit from 2015, and 1 in 6 said it was not a problem. That percentage has been relatively constant over time. But then the data are divided by Republicans and non-Republicans, which is Republicans and Democrats and independents. And you can see that Republicans, only 40% of Republicans think it's a big problem, and 35% think it's not a problem. So there's only a few more who think it's a big problem among Republicans. While for white non-Republicans, it's 86% who think it's a big problem compared to 4% who think it's not a problem, 92% among blacks, 3% not a problem, and 85% among all other racial and ethnic groups who think it's a big problem compared to 10% who think it's not. This is a major divide between the parties in terms of their feelings about racial and ethnic discrimination in the United States. This is a chart that shows the distribution of white voter preferences in presidential elections since 1976. And in this chart, you can see that the red bars are larger than the white bars in every election, although in the Bush v. Clinton and Dole v. Clinton races, the difference was only 2 percentage points. But when Barack Obama ran the first time, there was a 12 percentage point advantage for John McCain among whites. And when he ran against Mitt Romney, there was a 20 percentage point advantage for Romney among whites. And you can see that the average across this period is 55 to 41 It's about a 14 percentage point advantage. If we look at, now we're going to look at the 2016 exit polls to look at how the vote broke down by race. Again, the red figures are for Trump, the Republican. The blue figures are for Clinton, the Democrat, and there are some others. Among whites, Donald Trump had a 21 percentage point advantage. He had a deficit of 80 points among blacks. He had a deficit of 36 percentage points among Hispanics and the same amount among Asians. So you could see the division by race, and particularly the difference between whites and non-whites in the 2016 exit poll outcomes. Here are some data from the same recent Pew Poll, which is broken down, if you look at the red arrow, among whites, where Trump has an 8 percentage point advantage still. He's behind by 82 percentage points among blacks and 34 percentage points among Hispanics. You can see also in the distribution by age that the younger people are more likely to prefer Biden, and the more highly educated you are, the more likely you are to prefer Biden, and the less well-educated you are, the more likely you are to prefer Trump. So this racial divide persists. And I think part of the appeals in the contemporary presentation of Trump by his own self during his rallies and in his public statements reflects this appeal to his white base. So is this an easy run to victory for Joe Biden? And the answer is no, for a variety of reasons. And here is one of them. It's got to do with enthusiastic support for the candidates. When they asked the Trump voters whether their vote was a vote for Trump or against Biden, it was about 3-1 in favor of a vote for Trump. It was a positive vote for Trump. When they asked the same question of people who said they were going to vote for Biden, it was 2-1 a vote against Trump, but not for Biden. So the enthusiasm for Biden as a candidate is less than the enthusiasm for Trump as a candidate. And part of this is a reflection of people who supported Sanders during the primaries, who are more strongly anti-Trump, but less positive for Biden. So enthusiasm is obviously a key to voter turnout. This is something for the Biden campaign to be worried about. Where does the race stand today? And here are some things that the polls don't tell us, or that they could tell us if they were analyzed a different way. On the left, you can see the results from Nate Silver's model, which is a data aggregation statistical model looking at a variety of polls. As of yesterday, they estimated that Biden had a 7.8 percentage point lead over Trump. This is an estimate that's based not only on the polls themselves, but on an assessment of the historical accuracy of the polls. It's not a simple averaging of the poll results. It's better off to be ahead than to be behind, of course. but most political strategists would like to see their candidate above 50%. Biden is very close, but not quite at that particular level. We know from the 2016 experience that it's not the popular vote that elects the president, it's the outcome in the battleground states. And currently, Biden has a very strong lead among registered voters in 6 battleground states that were carried by Trump in 2016. So here are data for Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina. States which Trump won by about 4 percentage points or less, including, of course, Michigan, where he won by less than a percentage point, about 80,000 votes. And according to surveys conducted for the New York Times by Siena College in June, in Michigan, Biden had an 11-point lead, in Wisconsin, an 11-point lead, in Pennsylvania, a 10-point lead, Florida, a 6-point lead, Arizona, a 7-point lead, North Carolina, a 9-point lead. These are surveys of registered voters, but that is not necessarily a good indicator of what will happen on election day. So this is an analysis from the Washington Post of national data in what we would call the trial heat. And I want to emphasize the difference between the preference distribution among all adults, which here shows Biden with a 15 percentage point lead, among the people who say they're certain to vote in 2020, in which the lead is reduced to 11 points. You can see the Biden support stays the same, but the Trump support increases by 4 percentage points. And if the sample is further subset to those who say they're certain to vote in 2020 and who say they did vote in 2016, the lead drops to 7 percentage points. So as we tighten the screen, or as we look at a likely voter model, which is increasingly stringent, you can think of this as moving from all adults to a low turnout election, that is, those most likely to vote. You can see that the Biden lead is cut in half. And that is also a source of potential concern. Here, you can see from an ABC News poll the assessments of these traits among all adults with a difference calculation again, and among likely voters, the smaller subset. So more honest and trustworthy, Biden has a 14 point advantage, but it's only 11 among likely voters. Better understands the problems of people like me, it goes from 17 to 7. Better personality and temperament for presidency, it goes from 26 to 11. Is the stronger leader, goes from 0 to -8. So again, you can see that as the sample is reduced from everyone who's interviewed to those who are most likely to vote, the advantages that Biden has diminish by a fair amount. And in the case of leadership qualities, the difference actually turns negative. This is another example of adjustments of the sample, which are very important. These are data from Monmouth University about a month ago in the state of Pennsylvania. And it is intended to show the difference between a high turnout and a low turnout election. And again, the movement is in the same direction. Among this sample of registered voters, Biden has a 13-point lead. in a high turnout election, he has a 10 percentage point lead. It's decreased a little bit. And in a low turnout election, it's decreased to 7 percentage points. So you can tell from these data nationally and in the battleground states that turnout is going to be a decisive issue in the election. So what will the 2020 campaign look like? It'll be a campaign like we have never seen before. This is Donald Trump accepting the nomination from the Republican convention in 2016. We're not going to have a convention where large numbers of people assemble in a single location. The campaign is going to rely increasingly on social media, not only because that's a national trend, but also because these large rallies are not going to be possible. And while Trump's 2016 campaign manager, Brad Parscale, got promoted and then demoted, apparently because of the poor attendance at this rally in Tulsa, he nevertheless was hired originally as a social media whiz. And currently, the Trump campaign has an advantage over the Biden campaign in terms of their skills with social media, although there's still time for the Biden campaign to hire additional personnel. So what will the candidates' basic strategies be going forward? Remember that next week is the Democratic convention, and then the week after, as is historically the norm, the party of the incumbent president will have their convention. For Donald Trump, his plan, I believe, is to energize his base by appealing to racial and ethnic divisions. It will involve minimal policy content. He has no interest in particular in extended discussion of policy. And he's going to organize his campaign on broad cultural issues anyway. He's going to run best when turnout is low. And so his campaign and other elements of the National Republican Organization are going to try to suppress turnout. They're going to do this a variety of ways. One is the president's harping upon the fact that voting by mail is subject to fraud, a claim that's not supported by any evidence at all. We don't really know the story about what's going on in the post office, but to the extent that people choose to vote absentee or by mail to avoid standing in long lines, partly because these lines will be brought about by reducing the number of polling locations, complicated by the fact that many people won't want to work at the polls. They're hoping on a low turnout election, high enthusiasm among his supporters, less enthusiasm among the Biden supporters. And he is also laying the groundwork, framing the outcome of the election in terms of the validity of balloting and the accuracy of the count. And both candidates, both teams are lining up lawyers who are already beginning to contest the way in which the votes will be counted. For Joe Biden, he's going to remain positive and empathetic. He's going to be emphasizing the difference between their personalities. He has a wide range of policy proposals that he is going to promote, but he's going to promote them in a kind of a unimodal way. He's going to talk about what he wants to do without drawing sharp comparisons to Trump, what he's accomplished or what he says he plans to do. And of course, he's going to emphasize turnout. There is no single reason to explain how Trump won the 2016 election. There were things that he did very well, he and his campaign. There are things that Hillary Clinton didn't do very well. And we don't know anything about foreign influence, really. But one problem that the Democrats had in Michigan is that they didn't have a very substantial get out the vote drive. And all across the country, including in Michigan, turnout was down in the urban areas, in the case of Michigan and Wayne County, and it was up in the rural areas. And that provided the margin, which was slim, but nevertheless significant, because in the Electoral College, it's winner take all. That supplied the margin for Trump to win Michigan and several others of those battleground states by close amounts. So those were the comments that I prepared. I hope it provides a useful framework for you and to understand what's going on. And I am now going to unshare my screen, and I'm happy to take questions.